The blind man, who is no longer blind, but very much healed, explains to his neighbors how it all went down. John 9:11-12. So they said to him, "Then how are your eyes opened?" He answered, "The man called Jesus made mud and anointed my eyes and said to me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' So I went and washed and received my sight." They said to him, "Where is he?" He said, "I do not know." These people, his neighbors and friends, were questioning him, and they had heretofore seen him begging on the street, and they wanted to know why and how. With regard to Jesus, they said, "Where is he?" They were kind of detail-oriented, if you look at it. But that's to be expected. Imagine if you had a neighbor who you always known to be blind, and one day you see him driving down your street. You see him turning into his driveway, pausing to let the door rise up, and then gently gliding into the garage without blasting through the back wall. Wouldn't you drop your hose or whatever it is you're doing out in your front yard and run over there with a lot of questions? Of course you would. You'd have all of these fact-seeking questions that American press used to have before they became ideological. Who, what, where, why, how? We learned this in school, and this is what we do. Why are we so curious? Why with all the questions? Because that's what human beings are. That's why the way God made us. This makes us smarter than all the living things. We ask questions and we learn from them. This is how people act in any culture around the world. So this is not at all weird that his neighbors would be so nosy. But these folks differ from us in what they did next. Today, in 10-minute Bible study, wherein we study the Gospel of John in 10-minute and easily digestible bites 5 times a week. Here's what they did. John 9:13. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had been formerly blind. Now, why did they have to go and do that? This will severely complicate things for this poor guy. Almost make him not wish he wasn't healed. Well, that's a little bit of an overstatement, but he's in for an ordeal because he was brought to the Pharisees. But as vile as the Pharisees have proven to be so far in our readings of John, they were still considered authorities by the regular folk in matters such as this. Healing was the stuff of God, and they were the local experts on God. And though Israel at this time was a nation that was conquered by Rome, there were still many remnants of the theocracy that used to be. You see, Rome is very smart in that way. They didn't destroy the local leadership when they conquered a nation. No, they merely limited their powers with the hopes of working together with the locals so that they could maintain a semblance of normalcy, so that the people would behave, and so the Romans with their soldiers could go on someplace else to conquer. The strange interplay that we saw between the high priest and Herod and Pilate when it came to Jesus in the last week of his life is a creature of the Roman occupation. All those people were trying to figure out whose jurisdiction Jesus fell under. And so Jesus was led around from the high priest to Pilate to Herod and back to the high priest. And they're trying to figure out whether Jesus was a religious question or a political question. And the treachery of the Jewish religious leaders was revealed when they presented him to Pilate as a political person, when they in fact were mad at Jesus for being a religious figure. They did this because they wanted to see him dead. So the priests and the Pharisees and the scribes of that day were recognized as authoritative, and they were respected. They were pushing back on Jesus from the very beginning because the religious realm was their turf. Anything religious happening in Israel was their deal. As we have learned, the Pharisees were often corrupt, as those in authority often are. But as they say in the military, if you don't like your leadership, salute the rank or the uniform. Don't salute the man. And so it is also with the political figures. If we don't like a particular governor or president, they're still our president and our governor. We all understand that. And that's what these guys understood as well. As we hear the next part of the text, you will understand why the Pharisees were so interested in this case. John 9, 12 through 15. Or 12, 13 to 15. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had been formerly blind. Now, it was a Sabbath day, and when Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes. So the Pharisees again asked him how he had received his sight. And he said to them, he put mud on my eyes, I washed, and I see. Did you catch it? It happened on a Sabbath day. He was healed by Jesus on a Sabbath day. That's what made this case so very much in the purview of the Pharisees. Well, they were experts on the Sabbath day. As a matter of fact, they had hundreds and hundreds of laws on the Sabbath. Of course, they weren't God's laws. And the Sabbath was such that if you wanted to have a day of rest as God commanded, you had to work really hard. It was scary. You were worried if you weren't keeping it right. It sounds really restful to me. Of course it wasn't. But Pharisee rules were not God's rules. They were rules made up by men from generation to generation. The Sabbath God commanded Israel to abide with or to remain in was meant to be a very restful time with them and God. But these guys made it stressful and rather horrible to do. But that's where these guys lived. They were like the classroom monitors when you were in school. Remember them? That's all they do is monitor and report you. That's what they did all during your life, especially on Sabbath days. They walk around looking for people who were breaking the Sabbath rules so that they could yell at them. And they expected everybody else to live in this way too, to be absolute fuss budgets on the day of rest. And since Jesus didn't live there with them in this and was not like that, they could not accept him. And we shall see this again as this case develops.